I want to introduce you to another person who's going to be with us. Oh my gosh, you look at this book cover, and I thought it felt and looked familiar. And then I opened, the manuscript that the publisher sent us early because it's not out as of this very moment. And there was an artist statement by Ted Lidenhatton, one of my dearest friends, and those of you who've been in Worship Design Studio for a while will remember my interviews with him, his work, his collaboration with me. And so it just feels really fabulous to know that those two people are working together in the world. So Ted Lidenhatton, this is in his own words, my work is best described as theopoetic and multidisciplinary. He uses this word theopoetic. You'll also, in some interviews I've had with him in Worship Design Studio, he calls it visual homiletics, which is fantastic. As a visual artist, I work with a variety of media, favoring those that are gratifying to work with and bring additional layers of meaning. The materials I use include myrrh, liquefaction, coffee grounds, beeswax, dry pigment, egg tempera, grain, gunpowder, glass, sand, and salt. And believe me, he knows the symbolism behind each one of those things. And when he uses it, it's always with a purpose. He says, I use photography as a tool to explore the world and to express my work, particularly installations, dry painting, and other pieces that are inherently ephemeral. The themes that recur for me include beauty, brokenness, compassion, justice, and belonging. So you can see why Ched tapped him with a commission for this cover. Fields of inquiry for me are ornithology, which has to do with birds, neuroscience, visual perception, theology, natural science, and color theory. Ted brings such riches to all his work and has been such a blessing in my life. I had some photos up earlier in my introductions that we pre-recorded. So I had this picture of our collaboration together at 2012 General Conference. And I also had this picture of our collaboration when you created that beautiful piece on the floor and I danced. And it featured the coffee grounds of the conversations of the artists that had gathered. So let's take a look at this. And Ted, would you help us to see what came out of your considering Ched's work?
Well, thank you, Marcia. I'd be happy to toss some words around. But thank you for the invitation, first of all. I mean, to come back around to the Gospel of Luke, which was actually the door that I knocked upon, thought I was knocking on, to meet Ched's work, but it turns out it was a different door. We went through Mark. So coming back to Luke and looking at this story and what he has to offer and how Ched is handling it. The invitation to work on this cover, it was one of those opportunities that certainly once in a lifetime, because I knew that there was, working with Ched and knowing that it was that the book was about Luke. I mean, there was no way that we could fail. The book was so rich, Ched's work is so rich that there wasn't any way for us to miss on this. It was just a matter of how we were going to approach it. And so with that sort of freedom going into it, I went through Ched's outlined, went through the Gospel of Luke, and came upon and really came to love and appreciate Luke's attention to seeing, seen as an artist, seen as a healer. He really focuses in on that, pardon the pun. But the sycamore tree that Zacchaeus scampers up really stood out to me. I mean, I've paid attention to trees for most of my life, all of my life, so I wasn't surprised that one would catch my attention. But Luke's the kind that will include details that are really important, and Ched, maybe more than anyone, has taught me when you're opening the text that these details are little portals and they lead places. And if you're willing to do the work and to be open to it, you're going to find some things in there that are wonderfully subversive. That's one of the things that that I appreciate about, well, about Ched's work, about Luke's work, about Jesus' work. This to subvert, to turn from underneath. And so subverting the shallow way of seeing is really what I think that Luke is about, and why I just get such pleasure in reading Ched's stuff. So the image that you see there, that's a sycamore tree, and it's one of my favorite trees this time of year where I am, Western Hemisphere, central Iowa. The leaves are gone now, and so the sycamore tree, Western sycamore and American sycamore, um, they really show off right now because their bark is white, and so you can see that there are these like these still like lightning strikes, these white branches that go up through the woods. So they're dancing in this really incredible way. Um, so playing around with that image, the iconography that you see there, as I mentioned, sycamore tree, there are six leaves, raven in the upper right-hand corner. And then that's a watchtower, imperial watchtower that you see there in the center. But I knew I was going to work with sycamore, and so then set about trying to find it. Well, what I was going to do originally was something very different than what you see, and that's due in part because of the beauty of the wood. I was going to get into this wood and really carve into it, and just kind of just I was really looking forward to diving in deep to the wood, literally. But I got this slab, which Ched mentioned is, it's thick and it's heavy, and it's just wonderfly satisfying, incredibly strong wood. Structure similar to oak. So if you're familiar with working with oak, it's got that kind of a it's got that kind of a heft to it. And it was so drop dead gorgeous that I thought, I can't carve into this. The wood is, and I think I said to Ched, like, let's just take a photograph of this piece of sycamore that I got, and we'll call that good. Like, this is done. But what I ended up using, what you're seeing there, is very minimal. This is a pyrography, is what it's called, drawing with heat. So I'm burning into the wood.
Mm.
And it's very similar in style to the sketch. So there isn't very much distance. Like, if I were to then take this sketch and then work it into a painting or into a sculpture, it would go into a different direction. But there's an immediacy to this that is me drawing with, the Chinese would call it a fire needle embroidery, where you have a needle point that is red hot, and you're simply drawing into the wood. So I'm smelling the sycamore as I'm working on it. I'm burning this in, and following the growth rings that you can see, the annual growth rings.
Mhm.
I counted them up, and it's, surprisingly enough, or not at all, it's a 40-year-old slab. So Jubilee branch is what I call it, and Chet will have a
Mm.
little bit more. Brings us back to Jubilee on that. So
Mhm.
that's a short version. The cave we can get into later, and the raven and the lily of
Yeah.
the field. It was just so much fun to get into the wood itself, and to just want to add to it if I could, but also not wanting to cover it up or to get in the way.
Yeah. This close up here that I just pulled up, the wood itself is, like you said, is so much a part of the artistry, a part of the imagery. It is, and it strikes me as kind of ironic, drawing with heat. I feel like sometimes that's what preaching is like, right? Um, like a fire needle embroidery on our souls, if we are really, inviting the gospel to etch itself, as it were, on our lives, that transformation. Ted, this is just really incredible. I'm so struck by the roots that are touching this. Um, what would you call that? That opening in the wood.
Yeah, it's called the check. It's where, as the tree dries, yeah, it opens up. And that lily of the field that you see there, is, I mean, that's a rhizome. The
Mm.
flowering body is beautiful and wonderful, but the mystery and the action is going on underground. And
Like a mushroom.
so exactly. So you see this, you see this flower and you think, oh my gosh, it's gorgeous, and it is, but there's some subversive stuff going on underneath.
Mm.
So you see the rhizome there, the roots are now going into that check, which goes all the way through to the other side of that slab.
Mm.
So Ted and I are thinking about calling our collaboration Ted and Ched in Czech.
And, so this idea that Ted is bringing us, what we can learn from nature is so important. And Ched, also, I know that you do a lot of work, you and your partners, your organization partners, in ecology and that kind of thing. So it all weaves together, it seems. Yeah. Yeah. And so this door, Ted, let's finish this little portion with where is this door taking us?
Well, that's a really good question, and what I'd like to do is to toss it over to Ched. He's been living with this piece now, and so it's more his than mine, in a wonderful sort of relay, kind of passing it on. The cave into sycamore trees, as they grow, it's not uncommon for them to hollow out. And so if you see a sycamore tree, walk around it, because you might find a cave, you might find an opening, and some of them are large enough that you can go into, and there really is a wonderful, wonderful little ecosystem going on in there. So it's quite natural for the tree itself to develop that, but then how that opens up into the caves of the story and the mystery and that subversive truth that is happening underneath. Ched, can you want to pick up on where that cave is going to?
Well, I want to say that Ted and I had really wonderful Zoom conversations for about a month, talking about what this piece might look at, and it was such a delight. Ted is not only a brilliant artist, but a brilliant theologian, and we had a lot of fun. These hollows that Ted talks about are particularly evident after fires, where the fire burns on the inside, which gets back to the embroidery bit. And because Luke's Jesus is very articulate about his ancestor Elijah, we thought, well, why not have Elijah's cave be a little hollow in a tree, and wanted Elijah represented. All of this art is, as you can tell by the overall composition, bearing down, surrounding the Imperial Tower in the distance, which is part of the argument of this book, that we are in a struggle between the great economy and the imperial economy. One other aspect to the piece that we haven't mentioned yet are the 6 green leaves, which represent Luke's 6 rich man stories in the middle section of his gospel, which forms the architecture of the second half of the book.